Dear speakers, dear participants, we have the second day of the conference. This is the second day of the annual conference, Energy Without Gender. I would like to introduce today's panel. Ukraine as a strategic partner of EU for building energy security and decarbonization of the economy. And our today's moderator, Yulia Burmistrenko, who is an advisor to the General Director of DTEC for International Relations and also member of the board of the Women's Energy Club. Also, dear participants, I would like to remind you that we have the chat box where you can ask the questions to the speakers. Is disabled. If you have particular questions to the particular speaker, please address that question to that particular speaker. In the end of the presentations, the moderator will read your questions and ask them to the speaker. So the chat is open. Please ask your questions. And Yulia, I would like to give you the floor. Thank you for this opportunity.
Today I would like to start from one very important source that was voiced yesterday at the first panel. The reconstruction of Ukraine has already begun. We cannot wait for the end of the war. We are acting right now. And therefore, the issue of decarbonization and the development of renewables is quite relevant already today, even in those conditions when some of our participants cannot be sure that they will have electricity throughout this discussion. And if early in Ukraine, we said that by 2030, it would be unrealistic to receive 25% of electricity from renewables, today we are increasingly talking about 50%. And we at DTEC consider this figure to be real. And therefore, fortunately, today we no longer have the discussion about whether renewable energy sources are needed in Ukraine. And we can already discuss not whether we will reach this goal, but how exactly we are going to achieve it. And the question now is really, will we be able to ensure a just transition, including gender equality? And yesterday, so I would like to now to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Inna Sovsun. Inna is a Ukrainian professor and politician. Ms. Sovsun served as Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, was Vice President of the Kiev School of Economics, and Inna is a full professor of the National University Kiev-Mohyla Academy. Ms. Sovsun is currently a Ukrainian MP, a member of the Committee on Energy of the Verkhovna Rada since May 2020. And as a Ukrainian MP, Ms. Sovsun focuses on renewable energy development in Ukraine, as well as European Green Deal implementation. And that's why we have Ms. Sovsun on this panel. Inna supports coal phase-out in Ukraine, which could substitute renewables. And in the current Ukrainian parliament, we know that 25% of members are women. This is a very small number, given that women are 55% of the population of Ukraine. In other words, Inna is one of those who are changing the gender balance in the Ukrainian parliament and in the energy sector today. And this is really inspiring. So having said that, I would like to frame the discussion by asking two questions to Inna. And the first question is that decarbonization is a long process, a road that we will walk hand in hand with the European Union. How to make sure that the voices of women are heard, their opinion is taken into account, and what mechanisms should we use to ensure this? This is the first question. The second question is you have worked and continue to work in the field of education. We increasingly come to the conclusion that the issue of gender balance is closely related to educational opportunities for women, the promotion of technical specialities, opportunities for advanced learning and postgraduate education. So what, in your opinion, can be done in this area to improve the gender balance in the energy sector of Ukraine in the future? Ina, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Yulia, thank you very much for the kind introduction and for framing the discussion. I think I will switch to Ukrainian, given that the majority of the audience is Ukrainian. So Torsten, I'm sorry if Christina, I hope the translation will work out for you just fine. Отже, шановні учасниці, учасники.
So dear participants of the conference,
я вважаю, що це насправді важливо.
I'm happy to be invited. I believe this is important. This discussion is important. This is even doubled for me. As Yulia said before, I have lengthy experience in the field of education. For more than 2 years, I'm in the Parliamentary Committee for Energy. I'm involved in gender for quite a while. Therefore, there is a combination of several directions I'm involved in. And therefore, it's nice for me for those reasons, because I believe those dimensions are important. Therefore, I will start with your first question, how women should and could be included into the discussion about energy. I believe that the answer to this question is clearly correlates with what Yulia said in her introduction, with development of the renewables, because actually renewables are much more inclusive. They are more inclusive because they are more competitive. And those spheres which are more competitive, they are less monopolized and based on the technology, on accordingly on their merit, meritocratic approach. Automatically they become more open for different categories of the public, including the women. Because if you look into the traditional energy, it is quite closed. Very few we can see the women onto the leadership positions. Why? Because those are the sectors which are from the Soviet times have remained less mobile, and the traditions have remained the approaches. And indeed, from generation to generation, also via education, mainly men chose that sphere. It was quite a closed man's caste. However, development of the renewable energy was built in a different manner. That sphere has emerged quite recently, and it was being developed. It was being developed on a competitive basis. Therefore, I believe this competitiveness in the power sector, when they compete in the open manner, rather than by some hidden deals or some hidden talks, when this man club usually works, when somebody knows someone, they are acquainted, they have cooperated since long ago, they understand everything, they know how to solve the matters between themselves. When the decisions are taken in a closed manner, this supports conservation, existing relations, including gender ones. We know that from many spheres, not just energy. The same is in education, the same is in healthcare, many other spheres. When the decisions are taken in the closed circle, there is no transparency in decision making, there is no competition. Usually they keep the gender balance, which existed for centuries. And this was a balance in favor of men. It looks to me that there are good opportunities also for women to get included into the matters of energy via development of the renewables. This is the English term which first comes to my mind. Therefore, I believe it's a good opportunity, and I believe this is one of the many reasons why development of the renewable energy must be supported. In addition to the obvious reasons, this is energy security, because renewable energy is always locally produced one. It is produced locally. Also, this is good for for the environment, I promise to talk Ukrainian. For the environment, this is good. Also, this is good for the market because those are competitive spheres which help to establish more transparent rules of the game. And also, it's more inclusive. I believe this dimension must be remembered. Further, as a matter which must be remembered is that in the sphere of renewable energy, there is quite a lot of international business, quite a lot of international investment. And again, international companies and or companies focusing on the international market, among the other things, try to correspond to the standards of social responsibility. And accordingly, they think about this dimension of inclusivity, equal representation, more than the traditional companies which operate for the closed domestic market. This greater openness outwards is also helpful. Also, inclusion into the international context also promotes that. Therefore, personally, I have friends, female friends who work in the renewable energy, and yet I know nobody from my generation of women who would take at least some high positions in the traditional energy and traditional companies, those which are not focused on the Western approaches. Therefore, I believe this is important. Also, it's important to remember of the political dimension of this matter, because you mentioned that in the parliament, 22% are women. This is negligibly small number. I remind to myself, and elections took place, the journalists have asked me if I'm happy that the representation of women has increased at least twice. I say, this is, I'm not, because unless it corresponds to the number of women in the population, this is not the right representation we should be happy about. The percentage is small, yet we should note that still there is gender disbalance in the distribution among the spheres where women operate in the parliament by affiliation with the committees. And here also the Committee for Energy is indicative, because nowadays in the committee, after the new changes, 26 members, among them three are women. This is comparatively a small share. And of course, this is not representative. Here we could prove that indeed historically women were less represented in the energy sector. Historically, my background was not connected to the power sector before I began to work in the parliament. I do not conceal that. At the same time, a lot of men working in the same committee have no background in the energy either. This is not a question of the background in that sphere. This is really the matter that somebody believes. If we look into traditionally female committees like health and education, indeed a large share of women, and not always, because those women are from the same sectors. Just it is believed it is a more logical sphere of activity for women. This must be adjusted gradually. I'm saying from my own experience, and yet I believe that the only way to improve that is trying to enter, to understand, to make efforts, and to work in order to improve one's expertise. At home, I have a special bookshelf also with books about power sector that I'm reading in order to improve my expertise, because there is no other way. Rather than expertise, the women can win. This must be remembered. Regretfully, this is the only way to achieve at least equal rights for women. Now, moving to your second question, if I remembered the books as well as education, how our education indeed streamlines, this is a good English word, streamlines men and women into several professions. This is interesting. It goes at the level of stereotypes. This is not at the level of actual knowledge. If to look at the results of external independent evaluation into mathematics, it is the same for boys and girls. Also, we know that the girls study in a more sustainable way. Therefore, their level of education at the school level, high school level, on average is higher compared to the boys. As a result, boys choose the professions. They more often choose specialities that give them access to professions that generate higher income to them. This is, I would phrase that line. Why does it happen? Because there is understanding that this is not for a girl. What will you do there? This is something unknown. This is for the boys traditionally, because quite often they continue relating the energy with hard manual work or the work in some remote regions, uh, remote localities. Under the modern energy, this is not fully true. And indeed, there are quite many opportunities to work differently. Uh, Yet this stereotype remains in place when energy sector remains to be the masculine sphere. This is a regret because girls do not choose on the early stage. I know it also as a level of practice of school teachers. For example, physics, first of all, there is mathematics and physics. Those subjects are important. Even the teachers during the lessons say, why the girls need it? If there are some experiments, let the boys do them. If they make some experiments in the class, they say, well, let the boys do it. Uh, I remember those stories with girl students, and they say at schools we were not allowed to make the experiments, only the boys were allowed. When it happens at the level of day-to-day practice, when you are 14 and continuously, day by day, from year to year, you are told that physics is for the boys. In the best case, you can only help. Of course, they don't have their interest formed, nor confidence, nor understanding that this may also provide for career opportunities for them. And of course, this is a regret. Moreover, shall we admit honestly, there is another problem with those who choose those specialties connected to energy, and this is a global problem, not related to gender equality. Regretfully, this is low level of education in general. If you look into the average score of the mm, uh, of people who enter the university on engineering professions, this scares me. It means that we won't have the new generation of engineers, or that the companies will have to train them from scratch. And this also means for the companies that they will have to invest a lot. And also, it's not clear whom to invest into. That this balance, will not turn it into a special lecture about the problems of university education in Ukraine. This disbalance, however, emerges for several reasons. First, those who have higher results in math and physics choose IT most often. Also, the girls. I, there are more girls in the IT, yet engineering professions do not have the same prestige. There is no understanding how this can lead you to some interesting career, and for girls and for the boys, but especially for the girls. And secondly, of course, qualified freshmen join not the engineering specialties. The law, the economics takes a lot. Economics is important for the energy sector. Yet, if there are no engineers, the economists will have nothing to do. The result is that the average level of freshmen in the universities is low. If to interest well-qualified girls, we could have improved the average level of freshmen for engineering specialties generally, because nowadays we cut off a large number of qualified applicants because we say this profession is not for the girls. And by doing that, we harm the entire sector because we select less potentially highly qualified employees. This is important both from gender equality perspective, also for development of the sector. I'm also scared about the situation of training of specialists into nuclear power. There were several publications, also the last one I read of the dean of the department or head of the department from Kiev, from Kharkiv-based Karazin University, which trains specialists in that field. They analyzed the average score of the applicants for the nuclear power. And those are the scores that they would not could not have entered the IT. A very low score, I can guarantee people cannot become professionals if they have the average score 120, 150 on the profile specialty. This is the low score. The minimal should be 160, 170, and this is well understood in the university. And yet, if they have this high threshold, they will have no applicants. We need to do it at the same way we did it for the healthcare. It was cancelled, however, and this is also a big problem. The same should be done in the especially important engineering specialties. Nuclear power is scaring me because regretfully it means that as a person with a 10-year experience of being a professor, if someone has a threshold 120, entry score 120, they will never become experts. The miracle will not happen. Therefore, I believe that making the girls interested in such specialities could help them to solve the problem of general level of training of specialists. This must be remembered. I will stop on this. Thank you very much indeed, Ina. It was really interesting.
If I were to switch to English, for me, my main takeaways of what you said, something that really struck me. Thank you for this statement. Renewables bring competition to the closed man's club of traditional energy. I really loved it, the way you worded it. The second takeaway is that you took up the challenge in the energy committee without having prior experience in the energy sector, and now you start addressing the gender equality issue in all Verkhovna Rada committees. Then you are leading, setting new trends by guiding and leading your own example. And this is extremely important, that people, women, can set new trends by saying, I will do it, this is possible. I had no experience in the energy sector, I will do it. I'm a professional, I will cope, and you will see it's possible. Another woman that comes to my mind is Olga Belkova, who also did the same. She switched from, I think, tax committee or budget committee to energy, having absolutely no experience. Yes, so everything is possible. Let's just do it. Let's build this new future of Ukraine and help each other, support each other. Yeah, so let's switch to the second speaker. Yesterday, on the first panel, it was said that we should not oppose women to men. We must work together to improve gender balance, which will bring more opportunities for both men and women. And gender balance there is an attempt to have gender balance on our panel. And we are very grateful to Torsten Wollert for joining this discussion today. So now a couple of words about Torsten. I have known Torsten for many years as really a great friend of Ukraine through his activities within the European Commission Support Group for Ukraine, as well as the delegation of the European Union to Ukraine. At the European Commission, Torsten extensively works with the energy and climate-related issues. And among his main professional interests are comprehensive approaches to innovation and how they can be implemented by the EU. So, Torsten, I have also two questions for you, framing the discussion. You are deeply familiar with the peculiarities of the Ukrainian energy sector, the problems of its transformation and greening. We would love to hear your opinion on how to ensure this energy transformation in war, now and post-war conditions, and how to ensure gender balance in doing so. And the second question is, Ukraine in March synchronized with European Union and SUI grids. And this happened a year ahead of the most optimistic schedules. What do you think will be the role of Ukraine in the energy system of Europe? Will we be the ones who need to be continuously rescued, helped, assisted, or will we be able to contribute to strengthening the energy security of the EU? The floor is yours, Torsten.
Я дуже дякую за запрошення.
Thank you for this invitation.
Let me start by outlining that the European Union, also in this specific field of discussion about gender, etc., is of course a strategic partner for Ukraine. So if you look at who is intervening in our cooperation and also in the emergency support now, which is organized by the European Union for Ukraine in this extremely difficult situation, where essentially the energy sector is a military target of Russian attacks. It starts with Ursula von der Leyen. You have Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. You have Director General for Energy in the European Commission, Mette. You have the director, Mechtet Verstov. So it goes all the way down, for instance, in Kiev. You probably know her, Chloe Alio is the head of the energy, also the section in the EU delegation dealing with energy. So I would argue that this picture of energy being, let's say, a closed boys club is not necessary. I mean, you see it that in other contexts it works. And yesterday in the panel, which unfortunately I couldn't listen into, you had the head of the German Energy Agency, also a woman. So it really is, as a bit as Ina said, it's a bit about the perception when you are young. Is this something which you want to do, where you can make a career, or is this for the others? And I think this is a point probably not for me to discuss now. It's a really very Ukrainian question, but I think it's fundamental. If the girls are afraid of touching on energy, then of course they will not develop this interest, and then of course they will not build a career on this. So I think it really starts very early with the education system. But on the energy transition and decarbonization and greening, and linked with the question of gender, I fully agree that the global tendency towards renewables, towards distributed energy production, and towards smart technologies which are linked to IT, this is definitely something which is in favor of more involvement of women in the energy sector. And you mentioned also, as in your experience as a professor, that, for instance, for IT, girls and women have less restrictions or less problems, mental barriers to go there, to build their career there, to be excellent there. And this is more and more also a feature of the modern energy system. And especially because it also goes, when you talk nuclear power plants, that's a very, very specific field. And it is not a field where many people feel at home with and want to go there. But when you talk about buildings, for instance, the big trend in the European Union and the United States, in many, many places in the world, is energy integrated in buildings, so that you don't have only energy efficient housing, but you also have even energy producing housing. So integrated renewables in buildings. And this, we have seen it in Ukraine. When we started working on energy efficiency in housing, when we promoted OSBB, for instance, it turns out that the majority of the heads of OSBB, and the very active ones, the really brilliant ones, lots of them are women. And the integration of renewables into the housing, into the residential areas, into the distributed grids will certainly help with reducing the barriers, the kind of mental barriers to say, oh, no, this is energetica, this is not for me. Because it really, I mean, as we can now see, when the energy system is attacked, all of us are concerned. In our homes, in our schools, everywhere, no matter where we are. So it is really for everyone. And the answer to this, I hope, in the reconstruction in Ukraine after the war, will be that the involvement will be much broader, because energy in the classical sense, I mean, the energy system that we have now in Ukraine has been built more or less in the Soviet time. So it was a very centralized energy system, a very big scale. So you have huge power plants which are not even located in the cities but far away from it because they were dirty. You have huge power lines, and it was a very centrally planned system which from the layout even was designed to feed the whole Soviet Union. And now, you know, the geopolitical context has changed, and also the technologies have changed. So if we are now building the energy or rebuilding, reconstruction, the energy system in Ukraine, of course it should be smarter. Of course it should be more effective, efficient, and more distributed. And this is also what Prime Minister Shmyhal raised when he was at the Ukraine conference in Berlin 3 weeks ago. Because now this has also received a security dimension and even a, let's say, resilience and war dimension, that you cannot protect a system which is not resilient, which is not distributed. Do you hear me?
Yes, definitely. We do hear you. We hear
Okay,
you
because
well.
I got a message that the internet was not there.
No, it's perfect.
So,
It's perfect.
okay. So, and in this context, the European Union is an excellent partner in employing these new designs in the energy system. And it goes even beyond technology. It also is concerning ownership, because a centralized system normally is centrally owned. And in some areas, like the whole high voltage grid, for instance, you need to have something like this. You need to have a central management, centrally owned system. But the more local you are, the more local also the ownership can become. And I mentioned the example of the OSBB. So if you own your local energy management system, which can be energy consumption and energy production based on renewables, based on storage in the future, you can also have this energy management based on intelligent systems, on IT. So I would argue that this is something which is very interesting I mean, in the school, for girls and for boys. So you will get, because it is linked to IT, to you know, internet, etc., you will get good people. But this takes an effort, and I think this takes an effort also by the energy companies to reach out, maybe to have some material also that can be used in schools, that the perception of energy being, you know, a huge power plant with, you know, people in these, how do you say, these helmets, etc., is no longer the future. So, and this, when we talk about the reconstruction, I think this fits very harmonically together, but you need to have a concept. You need to make an effort to avoid that the old patterns are repeated. So, for instance, there is a tendency to say, okay, we need to rebuild our country. So we need a centralized plan, we need a centralized management, we need centralized ownership. But this is not what is the normal or the natural use of these technologies. This is also not helping to rebuild the country as fast as possible, because you need regional ownership, local ownership, yeah, management which is closer to the customer, to the people, to the businesses. And you cannot ensure this in a country as big as Ukraine. You cannot ensure this with completely centralized system. So okay, let me finish there, and maybe we can come to a discussion on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thorsten. I'm impressed by the way you worded it, that not for me approach proved to be wrong, because when Russians attacked Ukrainian energy sector, it became evident that all of us are concerned and that we have to take responsibility in our hands, and this certainly gives more opportunities for both men and women. And the future of modern energy is in IT and technologies, and it certainly gives more opportunities to women. And I also fully support with both hands, and it also the text conclusion that the future energy has to be definitely green, but also decentralized. Decentralized as much as possible so that we cannot become easy targets of any future potential attacks. I hope they will not happen, but that's the main lesson learned. We have to be decentralized and dispersed, and all of us involved. Okay, let me now offer the floor to our third speaker, Oksana Aliyeva. Oksana is a climate change and energy policy program coordinator at the Heinrich Böll Foundation, the sponsor of our event today. Oksana's professional interests focus on climate change mitigation and transition to green energy as a major step in reducing emissions, as well as on the introduction of climate justice into public discourse. Oksana Aliyeva, who some time ago appeared at the meetings of our Women's Energy Club with her newborn daughter, and successfully combines those high social activity with her role of a mother, is an example for me personally and for many of us that motherhood is by no means an obstacle to a successful career in the energy industry. So we really need those positive examples today. Oksana, thank you very much for this. And the questions that I have for you is how to incorporate gender to multilateral and bilateral dialogue of Ukraine with its partners on decarbonization and green recovery. And what do you think about social justice regarding renewable deployment? I know you're interested in this topic. And the second question is, it's no secret that many traditional energy enterprises will be closed, and there are now many women working there. So will we be able to ensure a gender balance in the energy sector in the context of decarbonization? The floor is yours, Oksana.
Thank you so much, Yulia, first of all, for your kind introduction, and to our partners, Women's Energy Club of Ukraine, who actually have organized this conference in even war times. And we as Heinrich Böll Foundation really keen to further promote the idea of necessity to have equal rights and opportunities for men and women in all of the sectors, and especially in such important sector as an energy one. And why we have actually decided to still have this event, even in circumstances when so many things are happening at once, and people have less and less access to follow them because of electricity shutdown, because of connection lost, and so on, and need to really prioritize what they will follow or not. And the to some extent funny case is that yesterday we had an event. So we opened the conference yesterday. It was a panel at morning that was also devoted to the issue of women realization and their self-realization in energy sector. And later in course of the day, we as foundation, together with our partners on Energy Transition Coalition, had another event on barriers. So on analysis of barriers for renewables development in Ukraine. And this will not be surprising if we compare how many people have followed gender in energy event and the event on development of renewables in Ukraine. So you can easily imagine where the attendance was much well presented. And it is true for today's event as well. We have our online stream that is followed, but compare it to other topics that we cover in our work. Gender is still not that one on top priority, not of the very high hierarchy among those topics related to energy development. So social justice and gender equality still needed to be supported in public and in professional and in political discourses. So Thus, here we are, and we really need to talk, first of all, talk more about this issue and to make people ready, prepared, and used to that the topic of gender equality is not something not related to them, not something that is of their professional interest, but to allow the understanding that everything is very interlinked and very interconnected, especially when we talk about future green, hopefully, recovery of Ukraine and socio-ecological transformations that should accompany this process. If to come back to the topic of panel and to speak about Ukraine as a partner of European Union here, first of all, we to discuss European Union as our bilateral partner, and to the role of women and of women empowerment in further promotion of decarbonization and of Ukraine as a strategic partner in this sector. I would like to draw your attention to the point is that what we see, and Torsten actually has already mentioned this, that the representativeness of women at high-level top positions in European Union is compared to Ukraine much better. Women are presented at many levels. But when we go back to Ukraine and look to the situation within the country, it is not that brightful and shiny, I would say, because what we have at this moment that even at the National Commission on Regulation in Energy sector, where we used to have much more women in the past, situation appeared to be worse with representativeness at this moment. This is true to the Ministry of Energy as well. This is true to the Committee of Verkhovna Rada, as we have just heard from Inna. So those people who work on industry, on energy industry in Ukraine and who make political decisions at this stage are mostly men. And we really need to analyze this situation and to make proper conclusions. But to analyze this situation, we need to have gender segregated data. And this is something that is also lacking in Ukraine. At this point, we do not collect gender segregated statistics on how many men and women are engaged into the energy sector, and especially at different lines, different branches of energy sector, in production, in distribution, in energy-related education, and in energy-related political decision-making. So we do not have numbers, how many men and women are where. If person would like to know, you really need to pick up those data by very tiny pieces from everywhere to understand how the situation is at this stage. And my assumption, if I would proceed in doing so, I will collect data that will prove my now only personal observations on that men are much better presented at high-level political decision-making positions in the energy sector. But when we compare who talk about decarbonization, women or men, who more often raise this issue in their, for example, public speeches, in their analytical work done. So mostly we will see that in Ukraine, the sector of decarbonization is driven by climate, environmental professionals, and they are mostly female in Ukraine. And thus we can make such a theory that so far we do not have these women presented in political decision-making in the energy sector. We are unlikely to have topic of decarbonization cover it more and in better quality there. Thus, I would see necessity to incorporate this working both on promotion of decarbonization, but at the same time to see who are those driving forces, who are opinion leaders in the topic of decarbonization. And if these are females, in my observations, yes, they are, then we do need to give them more flow in political decision making. Another interesting topic when it comes to international relations, to foreign affairs, and if to come back to this like bilateral part of EU and Ukraine, we see that in many countries, decarbonization really is becoming political framing force of international relations policy. We see that decarbonization is mainstreamed, and that, for example, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, of France, of Argentina, they have participated in climate negotiations previous week, because decarbonization is on agenda for foreign affairs. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is clear in terms of war, it is much more complicated to digest and incorporate new topics into the work of the ministry. But even before war, decarbonization was not on agenda of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it was not that high prioritized there. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs talked before war mostly about trade, about such agreements with other countries, but decarbonization was something seen as not of their priorities, and they were all the time redirecting any requests either to the Ministry of Environment or to the Ministry of Energy. But we need to combine all of this. And when we look into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and into the sector of international affairs in Ukraine, this sector is also unfortunately male-dominated at this moment in Ukraine. Much less women are presented in the international relations and as diplomats in Ukraine. So we need to develop at the same time climate diplomacy, decarbonization diplomacy, to ensure that these topics are on the agenda and included better in EU-Ukraine negotiation processes, but at the same time to give more space while reshaping these international relations. We have now this opportunity to give more space to women to participate there, to those women who promote decarbonization and climate change action at this stage. The final point here that I would like to address is about renewables. I do believe that energy transition and deployment of renewables also open for us new opportunities to engage more women, but I don't believe that will be easy and that this will happen automatically. Unfortunately, what we see now, and from our last studies that we have conducted in 2018, for sure in this year situation might have changed, but I do not believe that to very big extent. So that study of 2018 showed us that in Ukraine, in traditional sector, approximately 22% of employees, in traditional energy sector, I mean, approximately 22% of employees were female. And in renewable sector, the figure was around 31–32%. For sure, it is much better. So it's like 1.5 better than in traditional sector, but is 33 enough? Definitely not. So this is not the proportion that we need to have. So we need really to put additional effort to mainstream gender diversity and empower women while providing these new job opportunities. And another study that we have conducted, and coming to Yulia's last question, we analyzed the implications of phasing out coal in electricity production in Ukraine. The study was done in 2021. and the horizon of analysis was 2030. And the study shows that if we shut down all of the coal-fired plants that provide electricity, some of them provide like combined electricity and heat production, and if we close domestic coal mines, so we will have some portion of jobs lost, around 55,000. But at the same time, if we substitute this this energy production with renewables, it allows to have around 160 new jobs in the energy sector. So 3 times more jobs could be created. But we need to ensure that these jobs are available for women as well. And this will not happen automatically. Additional effort, promotion, starting from the education, will really be necessary as a prerequisite to have more women. I remember my education. I'm an environmental engineer, and I was really fighting until 2016 because I didn't want to engage in the energy sector. I was pretty fine with my environmental sustainability background, but understanding that holistic approach should be applied if we speak about climate change, and without diving into the energy sector, it is not possible to address climate change in Ukraine. So here I am, and I really needed to also pass through all of the stages of denial and of acceptance that at the final end, I will need to enter the energy sector. And one of things that stopped me from the very beginning was that, like, I'm not a professional here, so how could I be well perceived in the sector by other people? And when I thought about those others, they were men mostly. And I do remember, now I consider them funny situations, but when we talked on the table during one of the discussion, and one colleague, we were 5 people on table, and I was only one female, one woman there. And the person, when he started to explain what is actually National Emissions Reduction Plan, he to some extent turned to me and was talking just to me, because he thought that I'm only a person on the table who does not know what is this. And facing such situations, I really believe that it will be very hard for me to work in the energy-related sector, in the sector of energy policy, energy transition, and decarbonization. It is so. It is not that easy, but we need to have much more female on the table, much more women who are present, who are visible, that others then do not afraid to enter sector. And this also should be one of the solutions and one of the instruments that we can now implement if we would like to have more women on renewables. Then we need to make those women who are already there very visible, and to make their cases known to others. Then it will make for young females who are at the early stage of their careers much easier to make this decision where they would like to apply for education with their 160 points either to IT or to renewable energy. So here I would finish. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to participate in the following discussion.
Yeah, Oksana, thank you so much.
Julia, may I just one question?
Of course.
Because in the European Union, we have a program which is called Back to School, where essentially people working in the European Union go back to their school to explain the kids, 15, 16, 17 years old, what they are doing, what you are doing. And the idea is to explain firsthand what is the European Union, because it's pretty abstract. And second, what are the job opportunities and how do you get there? So to interest the young generation, the kids, to engage in the European project. does anything like this exist? I mean, have you been to your old school or to some other school to explain to the girls and the boys about renewable energy, how it is linked up with, you know, all the fancy stuff like smartphones and all these kind of things, and what you can, that this is not just for the boys. And I think this is really important. But of course, it is an additional workload, but I have done it a couple of times. And also I found it extremely enriching because you connect with a different world, you connect with a different generation. And it's not only that you tell them about, but you also learn something.
I can comment on this very briefly. Unfortunately, my school is in Sevastopol, so I can't go there. But anyhow, there is no systematic approach on this. So there is nothing like a structure that every school, for example, has its own schedule when they would like to invite such professionals, their alumni, to come and to talk back to school children. But there are some mostly non-governmental initiatives like NGOs, civil society organizations who provide such programs and collaborate with educational institutions. And then it is mostly driven by civil society sector with those institutions that are active and see necessity to promote, engage, and participate in such activities. But there is not systematic. This is mostly like case-by-case examples in Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you, Thorsten, for this question. I took part in my school in such a session because in my school in Kiev, we have the STEM program for girls. And I was one of those who told them about opportunities in the energy sector. And I know other colleagues were telling them about opportunities in the metallurgy and presenting like options and inspiring. And what was also good is that not only girls, but also boys, those who wanted, they were invited to join. And there were quite a lot of boys. So it's good. Yeah, it's good. It works. There are such examples. Yeah. Oksana, you inspired me because you said a very interesting idea that decarbonization is driven by women and that political decisions on energy are taken by men. Yeah, if we sum up. We see today that energy, traditional energy, is used by Russia as a weapon in this war. And can we make a conclusion that if our neighbors would have had a more decarbonized energy sector and a better energy gender balance, that there would be no war that we have now? And can we also conclude that decarbonization and gender equality are two important pillars to ensure future EU security, not just energy security, but in general security? So if we have a decarbonized economics and gender equality, there will be no more wars on the continent. Can we say so?
Absolutely so. Yeah, I 100% agree. And there is a very wide idea actually also among feminist movements in the world that war is male driven, that war is like men play. So if we have much more women engaged in general in political decision making that concerns also international relations and security, then much less risks of war and threats of political insecurity would appear in future.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah. So it looks like a good KPI for all of us for the decades to go. Okay. Thank you, Oksana. Our next speaker is Christina Horing. Christina is a communications director at Solar Power Europe and is responsible for all external communications. Prior to joining Solar Power Europe in 2015, Christina worked in communications for the United Nations and represented the Norwegian Foreign Office Service in Athens, Greece. Christina holds a master's degree in environment, development and policy from University of Sussex in England. Christina, my first question to you is, in 2021, renewables produced about 8% of electricity in Ukraine. On the one hand, this has become a success story. The renewable energy sector has successfully attracted foreign investments and has developed very rapidly in recent years before the war. On the other hand, it's still very small volume, 8% is very low. What ambitious goal would you consider reasonable for Ukraine if Ukraine wants to be part of the EU? And the second question, will we be able to ensure gender balance on the way to this goal? And I know you could share with us interesting figures of the EU solar jobs sector and hopefully inspire us.
Yes.
The floor is yours, Christina.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this very important event today. First, I would like to start by expressing that the European solar industry stand in firm solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and we hope that the human suffering will end as soon as possible. The Russian war has revealed that fossil fuel is our vulnerability. Our over-reliance on Russian fossil fuel is a weakness, and as we witnessed, the Kremlin does not hesitate to weaponize this vulnerability. And on 18th of May, the European Commission put forward the Repower EU package, its energy answer to the Russian war, in which the Commission aims to reduce demand for Russian gas by 2/3 by the end of this year, and to eliminate Russian energy imports by 2027. In the meanwhile, the EU is diversifying its energy supply, ramping up the expansion of renewables, also launching a first-of-its-kind EU solar strategy with a new target of 400 gigawatts by 2024 and 750 gigawatts by 2030. And that's a significant increase from the 200 gigawatts we have installed today. And just to put those gigawatts into perspective, 1 gigawatt is enough to power 300,000 homes. So by 2030, solar will be powering almost 225 million homes and businesses across the EU. Deploying massive volumes of renewables in the European Union and in the Ukraine as soon as possible is critical to our stability, security, and prosperity. But if we want a truly successful energy transition, we need women and diversity and people from all backgrounds, from all levels. So a green transition must be a just transition, and a just transition must be built on gender inclusivity. So here are some good news. The energy transition has the potential to generate millions of green and diverse jobs. And here comes some figures. So the solar is the most job-intensive technology, creating 2 to 6 more jobs than any of its peers in the construction phase. Solar also employs more women than any other renewable technology, with 40% of full-time positions filled by women. An incredible 47% of solar manufacturing jobs are filled by women. And these are statistics from the International Renewable Energy Agency, a report published just a few weeks ago. But still, inequalities are observed within solar. The share of women drops to 32% employment for positions related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and is only 13% for senior management posts. But I would like to take a moment to talk about a shining example. Ukrainian woman tech entrepreneur Karolina Atspodina. She is the founder of We Do Solar, and that is a company that creates vertical solar panels for balconies. So it's balcony solar. And you can install these yourself on your balcony. You plug them right into the socket, and you're then producing your own clean energy. And Carolina Atisbona said that when creating We Do Solar, my biggest aim was to help everyone have equal access to renewable energy. Just like the majority of the population, I'm living in a rented apartment, and I find it crucial to be independent from the grid, especially during such challenging times as the energy crisis. So I think this is a very good example of solar innovation, women in solar innovation, that is having a real impact on people's lives. So just to talk a bit more about the figures, Solar Power Europe's job study found that 500,000 people work in solar in the EU last year in 2021. If the EU increases the EU renewable energy target to 45% by 2030, it will deliver 1.1 million solar jobs by 2030. So solar is on the horizon of incredible job growth, which means we have an opportunity to build a workforce that is inclusive of women and of people from diverse backgrounds and cultures. And so looking at solar in Ukraine, in 2019, pre-pandemic and before Russia's invasion in the country, Ukraine was the third fastest growing solar market in Europe, with 4 gigawatts of annual additional capacity. In the direct construction of Ukraine, the modernization and reconstruction of Ukraine's energy sector is essential. And solar and wind, as the most affordable, versatile, scalable technologies, will support the country's independence and prosperity going forward. And that is why the Solar Energy Association of Ukraine, the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association, and the Women's Energy Club of Ukraine, Solar Power Europe and Wind Europe, we have published this joint statement where we call on leaders from Ukraine and the EU to embrace renewables in Ukraine's reconstruction by setting a target of at least 50% of renewables in electricity production by 2030 through a combination of rooftop solar, ground-mounted solar, as well as onshore and offshore wind. In addition, what is interesting is looking at the mandatory solar rooftop program, which is similar to the European Solar Rooftop Initiative proposed by the Commission, which is putting solar on all roofs across Europe. And that could really support rebuilding homes in Ukraine by ensuring the lowest cost and clean power security for the people of Ukraine and for those that are often hardest hit by energy poverty and climate change, which is women. Just to try and finish off, so I will use the words of Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson, where she said, no one can block the sun. So renewables can power a post-war Ukraine. It can ensure energy security and autonomy, revitalize the economy also as an exporter of renewable energy, help mitigate the climate crisis, and also be a catalyst for gender equality and empowerment. So together we can achieve a European Green Deal. And I would like to return to one of the favorite statistics that we have, that almost 47% of solar manufacturers are women. So we can say that the renewable energy transition is literally being built by women, both in factories and here today in such conversations as these. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you today.
Great, Christina, thank you so much. Such inspiring figures, really, and perspectives. Thank you. You made me smile this morning in Kiev. I'm in Kiev, and yeah, thank you for setting this shining perspective for Ukraine. This figure that you gave 1.1 million solar jobs by 2030 is really inspiring, and that this workforce will include women as well and give equal opportunities. That's great. And something that also struck me is your proposal of participation of solar industry in the reconstruction of Ukraine and rebuilding solar roofs in Ukraine with renewable technologies, and thus increasing energy security, gender equality, etc., etc. This is just great. Thank you so much. Okay, colleagues, we have 16 minutes of our session. We have one question from the audience. It's from Lyudmila Pribitkova. My colleague from DTEC, Luda, is one of those who really started the work of helped us set up the Women Energy Club. She was the one who organized the first meeting, the first ever, many years ago, and I'm really grateful for Luda. A mother of three, and of three kids, and an energy professional. So Luda's question is in Ukrainian. Шановні учасники, ми знаємо,
Dear participants, we know that in Ukraine there is a good legal framework which helps the women to realize themselves. This is about maternity leaves, for example. What else could be done at the level of the state in order to improve gender balance in the energy sector and to involve more women? Also having in mind that usually power plants are located far away from the social infrastructure necessary for women, like kindergartens and the like. Do you believe that women over time can be interested to work on such power plants? What must be done for that?
Дякую. В мене короткий коментар. Що стосується...
I have a short comment. As far as the legislation is concerned, indeed, Ukraine has a very good legal framework, which actually does not create no obstacles. The only thing, the convention must be denounced, yet by legislation, for example, there is no prohibition for professions for women, yet Ukraine did not denounce the convention on such prohibitions of professions, yet inside the country it does work. Yet those practices which are called to create the workplace more family-friendly, yet it's on the beginning stage. As far as the maternity leaves, they are available, they are not paid for, and for 3 years they may abstain for working and still keep their jobs. For example, in Austria, this is really paid maternity leave, when the woman receives 70% of her wage, of her basic wage for 1.5 years. And this is totally different. This is important part of the income of the family. Salary of one of the parents and to plan parenthood is much easier. Those practices are called to protect the rights and give the opportunities not only for women, also for men. Therefore, we call them the family-friendly practices, because it helps everyone, men and women, to feel comfortably in this world, especially if they have children and family. I would add to them the regulations that would create the opportunities for flexible work schedule, also the opportunities for care for children at the workplace or not far from the workplace. For example, in August, I had a meeting in 50 Hertz. This is an operator of transmission in Germany. Most of the territory of Germany actually they cover, and on the workplaces they have a kindergarten. This is really helpful for everyone having kids to feel themselves like humans, rather than just running in the morning and then to the workplace and to panic who will pick up the kid this day. As for location of the assets, this is also a part of the general information campaign that the workplace must be convenient for people. If it is far away, then there must be conditions. For transportation, the work schedule must include the time spent by the person to get to the place where the place of work is located. And yet the way out is also the development of distributed power generation in the approximated to consumption. If such power generation is approximated to the place where people live, this problem can also be solved. In that case, automatically, if to focus the efforts in particular on the implementation, on the basics, the fourth energy package, clean energy for all package, clean energy for all, but the generation approximated to consumers receives the emphasis. This will also help to create the conditions for employment of women in a comfortable way, especially in the field of energy. Thank you. Also, I would like to say very briefly, I would like to say the same as Oksana. I believe it's very important to have the thriving of this discussion. This is not about the women having children, and therefore it's more difficult for them. Therefore, let us help them to solve this matter with children, because both men and women have children. A discussion must be how to help the women. Yet we understand there is the understanding of the public that women bear most of the responsibility and so on. Yet we should stop framing it like that, because as we do it, we fix it in people's minds. How to help the women who have children, and men also have children, exactly the same number. Both men and women, physiologically, it happens that they both have exactly the same number of children. As Oksana said before, this should be about workplaces friendly for the families, families with children. The key matter is to take care of the children, that caring work, how it can be supported. There can be the same problem for men. For example, the men who are alone as they take care of children. And they will have the same problem as the women have who are married and whose husbands do not participate in taking care of children. In both energy and in any sphere, it's important to reframe the discussion, saying that this is joint responsibility, how to help to implement it, and then to speak of all the steps, as Oksana said before, including kindergartens, including transportation, including the work schedule, while understanding that someone has to pick up the kids from the school or the kindergarten. Yet we need to frame the discussion in the right way, not to repeat the same stereotypes, which are already harmful, that taking care of children is only for women. Actually, it's a family business. It's good for women's equality and also for education of children, because for kids it's important to have the connection with both parents, not just with the mother. Yet we had a question in the chat and it was already answered by Oksana. I would like to thank Oksana.
I fully agree that with the growth of, let's say, local renewables, these questions will become easier for families. Because now, I mean, the boom of renewables in Ukraine was built on these big projects somewhere, far away. But I think it will be important when you think about the reconstruction that the renewables production is where the consumption is, because that makes it much less vulnerable, because you don't need all these big power transmission lines and all these things. And another aspect is that if you think about human security, what do you need when you live in an environment which has to be safe and secure? You need electricity, you need water, you need food, etc. And one aspect which I think is not yet really developed in Ukraine, but in other countries it definitely is the whole question of autonomous water supply. We see now when the energy system is under attack, that also the water supply may be a problem. And when you, for instance, are in countries like Israel, which has these security concerns already for quite some time, since the 1980s, they have changed their building codes. So they have to have an autonomous water supply for a couple of days inside the building. So you have a reservoir for each apartment, which is essentially attached to the apartment. So the family living in the apartment knows how much water they still have available. And this is linked, also mandatory, it's in the building code, it has to be linked to some solar heating, which of course in Israel is not a problem because it's on the Mediterranean. In Ukraine, it will be more difficult, but still, I think this is a discussion which would also help making people more comfortable in their homes, which will also create local jobs because somebody has, to do this, to take care of it, and which is also increasing the share of renewables and the share of distributed energy production where it is consumed. I don't think that solar power is looking into this. I have not yet seen an initiative on this, but when you think about building integrated renewables in the reconstruction of Ukraine in a decentralized system, in a human safe system, that should certainly be part of it. And this is not rocket science. I mean, local entrepreneurs can build these things. The solar heating is not super complicated. You don't need to import from China. You can build this manufacturing yourself, the installation, the maintenance, everything. So it's also a source of interesting business opportunities, of jobs, and of course, energy security.
Yeah, thank you very much, Torsten. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I think we need to wrap up now because we have only 4 minutes left. I want to say that I was really honored to moderate such a great panel. We heard very interesting contributions. And let me conclude by saying that we believe that Ukraine might have 30 gigawatts of renewables capacity by 2030. 24 gigawatt will be electricity and 6 gigawatt will be hydrogen and biomethane production. Ukraine is able to do this. Ukraine, if it reaches this objective, then 50% or 15 gigawatt would be exported to the European Union in the form of green energy, green hydrogen, and help the EU implement the Green Deal commitments. So Ukraine, we believe that Ukraine will no more be a problem, it will be a solution to the EU challenges. And that by decarbonizing and by achieving this goal, Ukraine will also, in parallel, build more opportunities for women and build an energy system which will be like dispersed or distributed and hard to target for attacks. So everything that will not kill us will make us stronger. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. We will be looking forward to the next fifth conference. Oksana, why don't we plan to conduct it in Sebastopol?
We definitely could plan.
So you don't mind.
Having this opportunity, I also would like to remind that in few hours, in 4 p.m. Kyiv time, there will be the next panel of the Energy Has No Gender conference that will be devoted to climate and gender-sensitive financing and aligning financial flows with the needs of climate action and gender equality.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.